Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. Please make sure to like, share the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're on social media, share the link, retweet it, get it out there, get people in here to watch what we're going to share with you tonight. So, tonight we have something very special. Special to me on a personal level as well as politically. We're going to be sharing this is the second time now that we've done a documentary screening. And tonight we're going to share a documentary, Shaka Shakur, Human Rights Held Hostage. And so, anyway, really excited to share this with you. And then afterwards, we have a panel. It's an exceptional panel. We have Akili Shakur, who is Shaka's partner. We have Jenipher Jones, who is his attorney, and does a lot of other amazing work in that sphere. We have Hondo, who is a very well-known figure in the new African independence movement, who I'm honored to host tonight. And Too Black, who, of course, I think a lot of our audience knows from Black Mist podcast, from his work with the Pendleton 2 and the Black Mist pod. And I hope that you all know Shaka Shakur by now. If you haven't checked it out, we had a interview on our podcast that we released a couple months ago that was excellent. And looking forward to sharing this. And there are some pieces that we will be sharing for the first time. Want to shout out the King Trill, who did some of the work on the media, IDOC Watch, of course, for kind of producing this documentary. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started. So because I know folks have a lot to get through, and we're going to be here for a little over an hour at least. And so the documentary itself is about 45 minutes of material that we're going to show there. So let me just present that, share my screen.
I came to prison at a young age as a teenager, 16 years old, so not only in general do you go through stages of development in terms of your political development, but when you come in that young, you also go through stages of development just in terms of becoming an adult. I started being politicized when I was, I guess you could say around 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. I guess for me is when I entered Indiana's first Supermax in Westville, Indiana. Being sent to the Maximum Control Complex for 3.5 years was a transformative experience and forced my politics and level of commitment to undergo a qualitative leap. The brutal, vicious nature, treatment, and conditions of MCC forced me to learn the power of the pen and how it was mightier than the sword. Being isolated and locked down in a refrigerated cell for 23 to 24 hours a day with no way to prevail and trying to fight back physically, you were forced to dig deep into your soul, your spirit, in order to survive or continue to struggle forward. For me, I immersed into a program of study and struggle.
I grew up with Mark Douglas / Shaka Shakur. He is my best friend. I support him tremendously. He's been incarcerated for a long time, and I've been right here with him. Wherever he moves to, I've been right here for my best friend.
And I met Shaka when he was incarcerated in Indiana State Prison. I was with the Northwest Indiana Coalition Against Supermax Prisons, that I was working with that group. And he was one of the correspondents that used to write and send us information in regards to the conditions that was going on at Westville, Indiana State Prison.
Oh, I've been knowing Shaka since he was a teenager. I first met him when he was confined in Michigan City back in mid-'80s. You know, he was a youngster, seeking his own path, wanted his own respect, demanded it, but was willing to work for it, you know what I'm saying? And good youngster, good brother. I took him under my wings, you know, because I felt his vibe, you know, very strong, very positive brother.
He's very intelligent. My nickname for him is Malcolm X because I felt that Shaka read a lot, he knew a lot, and he grew up in prison.
He's very much one based off of principles, and if the argument is put to him correctly, then he can back down off of it and see somebody else's position. That's what keeps me in love with him. You know, he does have his principles.
Mr. Shakur was a part of my class that I taught on performance and law in the summer to winter of 2020. And we feel really grateful for Shaka Shakur for being able to come to our class, for being able to share, and for being so thoughtful and thorough in the way that he's communicating about what has happened to him in his life, and also his analysis of what's happening really at a national and even international level.
He was the type of person you could tell that demanded his respect, but was willing to earn it. And he was seeking the right people to put him on the righteous path where he could earn it in a way of not being negative or disruptive or being disrespectful, you know what I'm saying?
Shaka was incarcerated at a very young age. Whatever crime he did, it held him in prison for almost 30 years. So I kind of missed that he was sentenced at a teenager. You know, he went into boys' school as a teenager. For what crime, I do not know today. But I know he spent 30 years just about in prison.
And I think Shaka at that time, I think he may have been about 17 years old. But I saw the potential in him. I saw that he was somebody who was expressing loyalty to the wrong thing. In other words, he was misguided, like I was. So I was more patient. I didn't try to judge him, but I would speak, and I would always say something positive. Keep going. But I always was kind of like reluctant because he was out there. he would fight a lot. I saw him again a few months later, maybe a year later. And it's like a new person.
But again, we had political prisoners and prisoners of war that schooled us and educated us and taught us about the civil rights struggle, the history of black folks' struggle, our struggle as black people in this country, and throughout the disaster, what it means to be black, and what it means to be a part of a community, and what it means to be organized, and so forth and so on. And that was the process, and then at the same time, having to deal with being confronted with raw racism. You know what I'm saying? Something that you may have not been confronted with growing up in the area, which is predominantly about black town and what have you. You know, so now you're being confronted with rural racism, white prison guards and whatnot that's not used to dealing with or being around black prison people or what have you. You know, that was visiting violence upon us. You know, come in with the stereotype and thinking that the system supposed to make you a better person and work for you and counsel that to help you and whatnot, and you get a dose of reality.
I can't remember what the occasion was, but it was something to do with, you know, everybody can go up on stage and speak their political views or about something about Black history, or it was something. And we were sitting in the chapel, and Shaka got up on stage. This is when I really seen how sharp he was in politics, from a not just a mental but a verbal standpoint. And he got up there and he spoke about, I think he spoke about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, some other people, you know. And I'm in the chapel. I'm like this here. Oh boy, I'm easy down. But oh boy, they come and get us. You know, he spit that thing, and I see the officers, the white hats, the captains, the lieutenants, and all of them looking at him. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay, all right, okay, here we go. You know, but he was speaking truth. He was speaking knowledge and wisdom and telling it like it really is.
He became one of our best comrades. He was one of the best, and he would be a good example of what I was trying to convey to the young people in the talk in there, of trying new things. You don't have the fear, you don't have the boundaries put. You test the boundaries and take it a little further, and that's what Shaka did. And Shaka was able to recruit a lot of people who was in his age bracket to come to our side. So he was highly instrumental in transforming the colonial criminal mentality into the revolutionary mentality while we were in prison.
They had blind spots at Indiana State Prison where they would take inmates and they would beat up on them so that the cameras wouldn't be able to see, and then take them back out, and you know, they have no idea what's going on. And so all of this was what they were protesting. Oh, and then, like I said, they were stopping them from being able to have certain books to read. You could only have books and magazines that were like basically mindless reading. I never knock anybody, no author, for writing anything they can get published. But it was nothing that was going to help develop their minds and help them as individuals so that they could make decisions on their own without being pressured from any one particular person.
A lot of these correctional officers, they had these jobs were correctional officers that wasn't really around a lot of blacks, wasn't raised around a lot of black people, and a lot of them that went to school was either bullied. You understand what I'm saying? Had personal problems at home in their lives, so they was placed in a position of authority, and they'd come in there and take it out on us.
He was one of the leading organizers. He didn't wait to the last minute to have a knee-jerk emotional response to it. He had an actual, well-thought-out, methodical course of action. And that course of action was successful. And it stopped a lot of people from being, it stopped the goon squad from being murdering the brothers in there and beating them down and attacking the brothers. It put a hold on it.
So they decided that they were going to take the ones that were the so-called leaders of putting this together, and it was like 6 of them, and they transferred them to Westville. And at Westville, they went straight to lockdown. You know, they were definitely in Supermax then, and so they weren't allowed visits. They weren't getting phone calls. They've always monitored the mail. You could get a letter through, but it might take forever. Same tactics they do now.
So in the summer of '92, I had just moved to Chicago, and I heard, I saw a flyer in some community center in the city about a protest outside of the Maximum Control Complex, the MCC prison in Indiana, Westville, Indiana. And the flyer explained how prisoners were being tortured and subjected to sensory deprivation. I learned that there was a major hunger strike occurring by prisoners at that prison. So I drove out and with a few friends, and we joined the protest. And at the protest, I learned that one of the key organizers of the hunger strike was Shaka Shakur. It turned out, I think it became the longest, at the time, the longest prisoner hunger strike in U.S. history. If I remember right, it went on for almost 37 days for some of the hunger strikers.
And so Shaka was the one that was giving us the information about sensory deprivation, what it looked like, and the problems with the Supermax, being locked in 24 hours a day. Sometimes you're supposed to get like an hour out, but you might go 3 or 4 days and never go out. You're just in the cell. And, oh, excuse me. And because of that group, him, Calfani, and some of the other ones, they ended up changing the name of Supermax. You don't hear them say Supermax anymore. They say secured housing units. But they still do the same things.
Shaka had the idea to form a newsletter of writing by prisoners in the state of Indiana, prisoners who he knew through his experiences in prison that these were very politically active prisoners, but they were separated from each other in different facilities. In the case of MCC, they couldn't communicate because of the Supermax conditions of sensory deprivation. So we launched this project. Prisoners would write to me, and I had a small collective, and we would type up and format the writing and then produce a newsletter and send it back into the prisons. And that became a way for Shaka and other prisoners to communicate with each other and with the outside world.
First of all, the whole purpose of incarceration has nothing to do with rehabilitation. It never did. It's just a myth completely. I mean, maybe a few people manage to get to degrees and get out and get some low-paying jobs, and they trumpet them all over the media. But the purpose of incarceration primarily is to keep people off the streets. Secondarily, there may be some revenge by politicians, and then maybe on the third level, privatization and profits. Although I think the fundamental one is just trying to restore so-called order with a sledgehammer, basically.
And when he came out, he does like so many of the brothers do. They hit the ground running, wanting to make a difference, wanting to make up for lost time, wanting people to realize what it really looks like, what oppression really looks like, and how it plays out, and how it demeans not only the person that's locked up, but how it demeans the family, the shame that goes with it, the heartbreak, the financial burden.
I started immediately speaking on the radio programs, speaking at different schools and community outreach programs, some of the community groups and whatnot, about the need for reentry and to have something for us to come home to, and trying to get brothers that was coming home to organize amongst ourselves. And we tried to get a group off the ground called TAG, T-A-G, Troops Against Genocide, which is going to be geared towards really community and grassroots organizing. And I was working with the former mayor, Thomas Barnes, as well, who was supportive of us at the time, and trying to develop and implement survival programs and decolonization programs, and programs that was geared towards trying to keep us out.
We were still working with conditions about prisons, and he was reaching back and still connecting with guys that were behind the wall, connecting with their families and trying to help the families out. He had one comrade who was locked up, Shamari Coley, and his mom was an elderly woman, and she didn't have anybody to really help take care of her and stuff. And so Shaka became her new son, because he would go at least twice a week to make sure she had groceries, if she needed to go anywhere, to make sure that she had a way to get there, take her a few little extra dollars, for her, because she was on fixed income. And he would do that for basically any of the guys that reached out to him that were saying, can you contact my family here? They're having a hard time here. What can you do to help out with that? To reach back, sending in books. He couldn't visit, but, sending in books, and he would, write letters. They would correspond that way. And just started to work with some of the families to help them understand, what prison was like.
Coming home in 2000 or whatnot, I tried to do things differently. I tried to take time to heal myself. I was in a different relationship with Akili. Instead of going back home to stay with my mom, I came home to her community and neighborhood, stayed with her, tried to build. We would eventually get married, and I signed up for school, Purdue University, and plug into the lecture circuit, do different comrades and people that I had cultivated political relationships with over the years. So not only was I speaking on a grassroots community level, doing different groups, Holy Angels Church Cathedral on the west side of Gary, who was very supportive of a lot of the effort that we were trying to do for us reentry. The college network in terms of, like I said, Princeton University, Beloit University had a thing they called a Rad Fest in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I was able to make a lot of contacts with, which is where I met Professor Catherine Orr from Beloit University. And a lot of these events, it would be youth that were attending these events from the community or some community or grassroots groups would bring in a bunch of youngsters to hear me speak, and I was just building like that.
When we got together, he had enrolled at Purdue. He was going to Purdue, and he was doing the speaking circuit, going around different universities around the country, speaking about the reality of being locked up. Doesn't matter what color you are, what it's like, and what the reality of it is.
So Shaka had landed a job offer at the university for a mentorship because he had a story to tell to other juveniles, young men,
and he was working with kids in the community. He was forever, our door would stay open with, because he's bringing them in, and I'm cooking and feeding them, and and he's just interacting with them, hey, what is it that you really want to do, have you thought about this? This makes no sense for that. Just kind of like the big brother thing, because he said he never had a big brother when he was growing up to put that hands on, and he says that they've had guys come in after when he was in there like 13, 14 years old, being locked up in prison. He says, and that would really bother him because those are still considered just babies, in a lot of ways. You whatever you've done mentally, you're still not an adult. You don't really understand what's happening.
But all the youngsters in the neighborhood came by the house, hear their music, play their music, rap, what I'm saying? They'll be out there, rocking and doing their cycles, etc. But everybody came by the house, and I got an opportunity to cultivate relationships with a lot of these youngsters. Some of their parents was in prison, some of their parents was on drugs, some of them we moved in with us, white, black, candy stripe, and took care of, got in school, got jobs, things of that nature. A lot of them was in the streets, trying to survive. And, and I would like show Black Panther videos and videos of different aspects of the movement, or have them working out, or just engaging them, And they started calling me Malcolm, man, your stepdad like Malcolm X, what I'm saying? It used to be kind of funny.
He would just sit and just listen. They'd talk, and he would listen, kind of question them, well, how you come up with that, and try and introduce them to books that they had never even heard of, newspapers, things that was information about what black people and people of color have contributed, helping with building the self-esteem to some of these youth. And I had teenage kids, and their friends were like, oh wow, they call him old head, that old head, and he wasn't much older than them, but they like to talk with them because he wouldn't talk down to them, but he would discuss what is it that you really think that is going on, and what part are you playing in it, and your own oppression. So that was fascinating to me, to find somebody that was that well read.
But some of them youngsters, sadly, I would be in the system years later, you know, of doing time themselves, you know. And some just didn't make it. I went to so many funerals out of the first 90 days that I was home, brother, of just kids from the neighborhood, youngsters of the neighborhood, under 25, that I had to quit going, you know. And it was just sad. And sad enough, my son would end up being one of those funerals, 10 months later, you know.
When he was released, and then he and Akili became partners, that's when he first developed a relationship with his son, Jayla. And if you saw Jayla, you saw a twin of Shaka, a clone almost. He was about 17 at that time. Shaka had barely known him. You know, he was separated from Jayla's mom, although they knew each other. It was just the love of his life. It was everything to him, you know, without a doubt. It was just, that was his purpose for living in many ways.
He came to live with Akili and I for about 6 months, and we tried to, you know, build and cultivate that relationship. You know, by then he was like 17, almost 18 years old. He was in the streets a little bit. You know, I pulled him out of high school because he really wasn't making no progress. And put him in an alternative school, him and my son, Asa, which is Akili's son, and tried to help him get their GED. So we was bonding, man. We was building, and you know, as he was becoming a man, you know, and I was engaging him and showing him, teaching him about my experiences and trying to repair some of the damage that had been done and rebuild from all those years I had been out of his life, you know, and trying to save his life.
They were becoming very, very close. They had a relationship while he was locked up, but not like it was developing once he got out, because his son was too young to come to visit him in prison on his own. He had to wait for somebody to bring him, and so once he came home, he would spend as much time as he could, you know, with his son, and he was just, you know, this is what it's all about. It's about the next generation.
I think he was on the west side of Gary, I'm not sure. And there was some kind of a verbal argument where somebody said, you guys from the east side have to stop coming over here to the west side, you know, stay where you belong, etc., etc. So Jayla said, I'm leaving. The guy said, you better get out of here. Jayla said, okay. The guy said, if you say another word, I'll kill you. So Jayla said, whatever, and turned and walked out the door. On his way out the door, the guy took a shotgun and basically killed him on the spot in a pretty nasty way.
And so when Jayla was murdered, I'll never forget, he says, you know, I've spent my whole life fighting for other people and trying to keep them safe, and I couldn't save my own. You know, and that really did break him. Emotionally, spiritually, he was just, you could see him digressing. You know, no matter what, he would try and put up a good front. You know, I'm okay, but he wasn't.
He didn't even have enough time to get settled after he came out of jail the first time, before he was basically hit in the side of the head with a baseball bat. Is there any way I can describe having your son be killed under those circumstances, your only child, your only son, that you finally developing a relationship with?
I believe if his son wouldn't have gotten killed, I believe Shaka would have been doing outstanding out here in the community here in Gary, Indiana. I believe all the reading that he entailed in prison kind of helped him with school and his intellect being, as a human being, even though he incarcerated all those years and they don't want to give those felons a chance. But I believe Shaka would have had a big chance if he didn't act on what happened to his son.
You just don't learn to control your anger and emotions overnight. It takes years to learn to control your anger and emotions. Steps, and sacrifices. And I believe when he got out, that's one of the things that took place. He was still, and it's hard for us to adapt to authority when authority has been the ones trying to push you in the ground, push you into an early grave. You understand what I'm saying? Break your spirit.
He would go into anger bouts where he'd just be angry. For no apparent reason. He would go from 0 to 100 in anger, and he would say, my only child, the only son, my only child, and I couldn't save him. I could not save him. I hadn't protected all these people. So he felt like he was a failure. Out of all the things that he was doing and all the people that he'd been talking to and, trying to get them to see things differently, another young black man murders his son.
I can't imagine any human being dealing with that in that way. Just, I don't know. It's almost like you want to commit suicide yourself at that point. There's nothing, it's everything to live for. And gone in a flash.
Sometimes we would be riding down the expressway, and he would just go into an emotional meltdown.
I was reckless, self-destructive, and just in pain, man. And nobody really talked to me. I should have got some counseling, some professional help, etc. And I'd probably be still whole today. But I was just hurt, having been gone all those years and coming home to have my son snatched away from me. And not only snatched away from me, but to be called, 15, 20 minutes to come pick him up by him before he was killed. And then to get to the crime scene and see him, sprayed out over the streets and whatnot. And cops laughing and smiling, and some of them former COs and newbies, it was just, that was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And a lot of that rage, a lot of that anger that had been repressed all those years just manifested.
Prison builds up a lot of anger in you. It affects you dramatically, so mentally and from an emotional standpoint. And you're used to living by a code and guidelines in the prison system that when you're released in society, you still living by these codes and guidelines. And it's easy for somebody to trigger you off. It's like when you go to war and they say you come back and you have them post-traumatic stress. We didn't know it then, but that's exactly what we was dealing with getting out of prison.
The revolutionaries are still human beings, and he needed that type of support and understanding from people that were around him, but he didn't have that. He was the alpha male who was the head coordinator of what was going on out there in the streets at the time. What he had to work with was severely limited.
We need people like the Shakas, the Balagoons, these guys that's been in prison years and years and years. That's I'm talking about, that can get out and can help the troubled youth in these communities.
Because I believe half of these young men out here, if they listen to what Shaka had to tell him, because it happened to him at a young age, I believe he can touch a lot of lives with these gangbangers out here in the streets. I believe Shaka has a real strong power to touch them, to touch these kids out here in Gary. Gary don't have nothing to offer for our young men here in 2022. They don't have nothing to offer. Is the crime is more down here, but they still don't care.
Should I be fortunate enough to blessed to get out, I'm trying to get involved in reentry programming, the abolition law center that we created, a lot of the projects that we have going on through IW with helping prisoners transition back into the community and being an asset to the community, as well as educate the politicizing the community as to the criminal justice system and the power that we have and the responsibility and role that we can play is organized.
I mean, guys like Shaka can actually sit down with people in a position of authority to produce these programs and show them exactly what to do and how to help these guys coming out of prison. He has that gift. I know for a fact he does because I've watched him do it. You know what I'm saying? What I'm saying?
He's determined to make a difference in the world because of J-Law and for his granddaughter and for all the youth that he has run into. He wants them to see that some of this is by design. It's not accidental. This is not fate. But the choices that are put before you, you don't have a whole lot of options when you feel like you're stuck. So that is the issues that the political prisoners in Indiana face, because they really do want to make a change out here, because they know what it can lead to. They don't want to see young men and women ended up in those same situations. But there's not a whole lot of options, because you're still fighting with people who feel like if you can't do the time, don't do the crime, and they don't understand the backstories that go with all this. And Shaka's backstory is pretty deep.
Go online, do their research on Shaka Shakur, and get his DOC number and reach out to him and learn him, and he'll write you back, communicate with him, and you'll see that this person is very sincere on getting out and helping the community.
He got some time if he, came out. It's still time. At least he'll have a chance to live. Shaka he didn't have long to live out here in this world. He hasn't been out here long.
At the same time, I'm 50-something years old now. My wife is a little older than me. We haven't been together for 20 years. Should we be blessed enough to still remain together? I'm trying to come home, man, and sit my ass down and enjoy life. I maybe got 20, 25 years left on this planet. I've been locked up all my life since I was a kid. I'm trying to enjoy life, watch my grandbabies grow up, and contribute to our struggle and represent for those that have represented for me while I'm down. That's what my hand is at. Giving something back. And at the same time, trying to educate the people and let people know this is the reality that we're dealing with. And hopefully create a new generation of activists and revolutionaries that's continue to push the struggle forward. And if I can do that, accomplish that.
You have 1 minute remaining.
That, and you can go and put me in the ground or whatever you're going to do, bro, and I feel like I made a contribution to what we're about.
So I'm gonna leave that on the screen just for a second in case people want to write any of that down. Um, I'll also just say quickly that in the show description, You all will see that link doesn't look right now, but we'll fix it in a minute. But there's a link tree in the show description that has a number of ways that people can support, connect with Shaka. Obviously, also, idocwatch.org, which is listed there, is a good website, great website to stay up to date. But as you can see, you can actually write him, and he's in Virginia, even though he's an Indiana prisoner, which I'm sure is something that we'll talk about a bit in a minute. So I'm going to let this video play out. There's a few more seconds, a few more screens. And then I have a couple other things, but I'll probably play one of them and then we'll get into the panel and then maybe we'll close out with another one. So. All right. So also make sure, as it says, to visit newafricanliberationcollective.org to learn more about the New African Liberation Struggle. All right. I'm going to play one more clip. I'm going to play. He recorded something special for tonight, and so I'm going to play that. And then I have a couple other clips of him, but I'm gonna save those for a bit. So let me just get this.
Revolutionary greetings to all of you on this cold winter day of January 23rd. First, I want to thank you, Asante Sana, for the love, support, and solidarity that you have shown me and those that share this reality of neo-slavery, of captivity and incarceration. As I think about the cold elements, I also think about the cold nature of man's heart, the cold nature of oppression in this capitalist imperialist system that is responsible for such. A coldness that will keep me in prison for 23 years and counting for a non-murder, a non-drug, or a sex crime. A coldness that will sentence a man to 63 years for a non-murder. A coldness that will use a juvenile waiver and conviction that was 20 plus years old to enhance his sentence by 25 years under the three strikes laws of Indiana. A coldness that will lock a man down in solitary confinement for 13 consecutive years without any form of due process. A coldness that will send a man into domestic exile, forcing him out of state, away from his family, loved ones, and support system because of his politics, because of his organizing abilities and level of influence. A coldness that won't allow my return back to my home state despite my 84-year-old mother's recent diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. A coldness that will subject me to 23 years of psychological torture and target for practicing what's supposed to be a constitutional right to freedom of expression and speech. A coldness that assault to orchestrate his murder, his suicide, his mental deterioration by using data reactionary and inmate collaborators, buffers, and proxies. A coldness that will place him in a prison on lockdown as the murder of his only child, forcing him to hear his voice, to acknowledge his daily activities, and breathe the same air as him. Can you say psychological warfare? A coldness that allowed the systematic bombing and killing of people, women and children to be bombed for over 100 days straight. Free both Palestine and the Republic of New Africa. Free all political prisoners domestically and abroad. All power to the people of Shaka Shakur. Once again, appreciate the solidarity.
All right. So thank you. Just want to say thank you again to IDOC Watch. They certainly were instrumental both in the creation of that video as well as just coordinating and setting this all up. Great organization in Indiana. And again, the link to the Shaka Shakur defense, which is in the show description. So you all can find it there as well. And then I just want to give a shout out to the King Trill, who I don't know all the people who played a part in the video, but I know that he was a part of putting that together. And so, shout out to him as well. And he works with IDOC Watch as well as, I believe, some of the reentry programs. Yes, John Breen, it is Beaumont Correctional in Virginia, correct. that is where Shaka is. So you might have opportunity to meet him personally. So I'm gonna read out the introductions of these great folks that are here with us. Panelists, go ahead and turn on your cameras when you are ready, so I know, so I can bring you to the stage in a minute. But we have Too Black, a poet, a member of Black Alliance for Peace, host of the Black Myths podcast, which can be found on Black Power Media. He's a writer. He has a book coming out on laundering Black rage, a concept he's been working on for a couple of years now. And he's one of the organizers of the campaign to free the Pendleton 2, another very important, cause campaign in Indiana. Jenipher Jones is a civil movement and human rights attorney and managing partner at a People's Legal Office for the People, LLC. Jenipher litigates complex civil rights litigation cases, and her work holds a specific focus on the rights of prisoners, particularly political prisoners. I've also had the opportunity to talk to Jenipher previously for work around Sundiata Jawanza, who folks might remember we did a podcast episode on this last August or sometime this summer. We have Akili Shakur, the wife, the partner of Shaka Shakur, a retired educator at from Purdue University Northwest, and director of Saving Our Families, SOF, in Northwest Indiana. And then we have Hondo. I hope I don't mess up the pronunciation of your last name, Chikwa, I believe. He's been a worker in the New African Independence Movement since 1990. He currently works with Rebuild, a New African Independence Movement periodical. And yeah, so anyways, everybody is here. I'm going to welcome everybody to the stage now. Thank you for joining me. Welcome. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all. I look forward to the people that, get a chance to watch it live. And then of course, the folks that will watch it on the replay. So I'm going to start with a question, just kind of, Shaka, of course, he wanted me to kind of save this to the end because I think, he puts as I understand, he puts the cause of liberation, of new African independence, of freedom and justice above kind of his individual story. But I think having watched all that we watched, we'd be remiss if we didn't take the opportunity to start with ways that people can get involved. And obviously we included those links. But, Akili and Jenipher, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to share on that context. Jenipher, I know that you might be able to share some things on how you're thinking about, his legal defense at this point, to the extent that you can share that. I know you can't, of course, share everything, but what could be publicly shared around angles of, civil and human rights, as well as potentially internationalism. And, obviously, the examples of kind of 3 strikes cases and using a case from his juvenile record and things like that. So, I'll just start with, either you, Akili, or Jenipher, whichever one of you wants to start on sort of talking about what support for Shaka looks like at this point.
Well, let me, Attorney Jenipher, let me just say this, that first I want to thank everybody again, for taking time out today to participate in this and to gain more information. And when you're talking about support in the state of Indiana, of course, they have the Indiana Civil Liberties Union, and they had once put out a bill that never got heard that was about compassionate release in the state of Indiana, which would be about the individual's health and their age would be in consideration and what they've been able to accomplish while they've been incarcerated. And it was stopped. It never got a chance to be heard. And so it's just been put in a drawer somewhere. One of the things that the people of Indiana and around Indiana and all over is to push legislators to pull that out, to look at that again, because they are the ones, they'll let us march and pray and all this, but unless you can get law behind you, they're not going to really make a big difference in regards to how they're going to treat individuals that are
captives. They're not going to make a difference on how they're going to look at punishment instead of you being able to start over again. I think Attorney Jennifer, I was talking to one of my comrades about the triple jeopardy, because if you get sentenced once and you've done the time for that, and you go back, something else happens, and you get sentenced for that instead of the individual situation that you've been hit with, you're being punished again for what you did before, added on to what you've done now. So you never get through being punished. And so people need to start petitions. You can start them in your churches, in your schools, in your neighborhood. And like I said, get the names of your congressmen, your senators, and send them letters stating that you want this
Thank
change.
you for using Global Telling.
I'm sorry, we just lost him. Those are one of the biggest ways right now to really support Shaka and any other political prisoner that we have behind the wall. We have to make it known to people, make it a common conversation. You can't shy away from it, and we have to let people know if they're asking you to vote, what are they giving you in return for your vote? And if you feel strongly about this prison system, then you need to let your voice be heard and let them know you do not believe that the state of Indiana should have 3 strikes written into their laws, and they should pull back out compassionate release and look at other ways that they can help individuals who've been locked up be able to re-enter society and take away some of these barriers.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Key. That's a really succinct analysis, and thank you, Jared, for having us on. I can share that there are significant civil and human rights issues inherent in Shaka's case. When I think about the history of carceral institutions, of prisons specifically, for some groups, there's never really been an instance where our bondage is not at hand, the nature of our bondage. And so that history, when I review Shaka's case, especially when I think about the presence and the infiltration of white supremacists in the Indiana Department of Corrections, it's remarkably present in his case. And it's important to really understand the constitutional and the human rights violations in Shaka's case. And there will be more coming out about that later. It's also really important to understand what repression looks like on the inside, meaning prisons, and the system's absolute recalcitrance to education and to organization fueled by self-determination. So it's a case that's really appropriate for international scrutiny, and it should be amplified on that level and other areas separate and apart from the international piece that legally I find troubling. So what I would encourage people to do is, of course, to write Shaka, to plug in with his defense committee and to support them if you have a talent in terms of research or talking to elected officials or writing letters. That would be hugely, as they say, important. So thank you again.
Jared, oh, everybody's muted.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. My fault. Hondo, I'm actually going to pivot to you because one of the things that Shaka and I had initially talked about was doing a kind of a history of the prison movement, and I think that would take us a couple of hours. And but we should do that. We should do a more extensive one. There is an episode that I can point to that we did with Toussaint Lozier and Dan Berger on their book, revisiting the American prison movement. And then, Garrett Felber also wrote a good book that talks about some of the organizing of the Muslim prisoners around, the changes of the rights, in the middle of the century, that I think folks should check out as well. But really, I think what would be helpful from you is this context of the New African prison movement, particularly in the 80s and the 90s, that Shaka is an important figure coming out of that period and becomes politicized right in that period inside, and does amazing work. I mean, it's sort of hinted at in that film his own involvement around control units and Supermax prisons, but he's a very important figure in those struggles. And I know that you've been involved for a long time in the New African Independence Movement and the work of the Spear and Shield Collective and so on. And so I wondered if you could share a little bit of context from that for us.
And that's a tall order. I'll say that a couple of references right off the bat. Sundiata Kohli did an excellent pamphlet called it's an updated brief history of the New African prison struggle. And it's a historical overview. I would recommend that. We had that on our website, rebuildcollective.org, along with Yaki's piece, which is seminal to us. It's called "Who Are New African Political Prisoners and Prisoners of War?" As far as, I'm not sure how to approach. I know, for example, when we talk about Shaka being in Virginia now, as opposed to the state of Indiana where he was caught his case, that is it's something that has been done historically. When I first started working in the prison movement, Sundiata Kohli was in Marion. He was in the federal system at Leavenworth, but he actually only had a state case in Jersey. So they had what they call an interstate compact, and they would routinely, to disrupt prisoners of war, political prisoners' ability to organize, move them out of their current situation and put them in a completely unfamiliar surrounding. And at Marion, they had one of the first control units where the warden openly stated that the purpose of the Marion control unit was to control revolutionary attitudes in the prison and in society at large. So that was why the Marion control unit was like one of the first control units that people was actually become. It was like a model for like Westville and Pelican Bay and everything else. They imposed those harsh conditions of confinement, and it was all in an attempt to isolate and break prisoners, New African political prisoners' will in particular. But the importance of political imprisonment is to understand that for us, I think it's a subjective response that we need to have to an objective condition. Objectively, we're a colonized, oppressed nation, and but we don't act like it a lot of times. But when we do, we understand that a lot of these, the state is an illegitimate institution. The state of U.S. It has an illegal situation with us because it's according to international law, we are colonized people. So that's a brief response. I'm not sure what it is. You have any other questions?
One of the things I would just love you to say a little bit about is just give folks a sense of what the Spear and Shield Collective was. And, like in talking to Shaka, obviously this was a very central thing. And there was a lot of politicization coming out of Indiana, out of Illinois, of New African prisoners in the 80s and the 90s. And so what can you say about, I don't know, the effectiveness of it in that period, or some things you would share from that?
Spear and Shield was very was very influential and somewhat, I mean, I think the effectiveness is still left up to the judgment of history. But the Republic of New Africa was founded in 1968, and we had a fight in history right from the beginning of resisting state oppression and being captured for it. That's where the RNA 11 comes from. So the RNA 11 and Mario Wideli, who was president at the time, were locked up. They did a number of years in the 70s, but going into the prisons, I think Imari was in the federal system, maybe Terre Haute. And apparently there were other New African prisoners in institution in Illinois and in Indiana, but particularly in Illinois, who got wind of this thing and realized that, hey, we are a nation. So they started with the Stateville Prisoner Organization. And Yaki was central to the Stateville Prisoner Organization because he was in Stateville. And then they evolved as they struggled with other prisoners, both in Stateville and around the empire. They developed into the New African Prisoner Organization. And they published the notes from the POW journals, the New African POW journals. So there was 12 books that kind of laid out a New African communist theory about the struggle for land independence and socialism. And so Spear and Shield was what evolved out of that, as they became not only a collective of prisoners, but a collective of New Africans like myself on the street. So, and we've continued our work, and it hasn't always been under the Spear and Shield name, but if you see Rebuild, we recognize the legacy, and we don't have the Spear and Shield in the corner on this one, but it's there in our hearts. So does that answer your question a little bit? I don't like taking time when we have.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I would love at some point to have a longer conversation with you just to talk more about that history in depth. But yeah, I appreciate that. Too Black, one of the things that, Shaka really wanted me to have you talk about a little bit is, you and I have talked a little bit about this in other conversations as well, but like the challenges of organizing around political prisoners in a state like Indiana, organizing around the Pendleton 2 as you do, organizing around folks like Shaka, and dealing with what is a conservative, entrenched political system. And again, that's not to say that, it's not to put the Democrats up and say that they're great or anything like that, but there's just some realities that you have talked about dealing with. So maybe you could share a little bit about that with regards to your thinking and your experiences with that.
Yeah, I think I was talking to a comrade before I got on here about this, still trying to think through this, because honestly, there is nobody has figured out a truly effective strategy, or we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Just to be totally honest, people would not be under the conditions they're under. But I guess to just give people a sense of the difference between maybe what people would call red states and blue states. Like, we understand, as the brother said, we're under a colonial regime. Like, that's clear. But there are different wings of that regime, and there's different ways that regime operates. So here in Indiana, I think on my talking to Matt, is one of my people off from the defense committee for the Pendleton 2, is saying, you're often playing defense here in a way that you're not maybe playing defense in some of the other states, because the gerrymandering just on the legislative political side is so deep that it brings out the worst instincts of white people. It brings out the worst instincts of the state because they've been able to consolidate so much power. There aren't any real checks and balances. So when you see a bill that gets passed to maybe open things up a little bit progressively in a blue state, you'll just see like, all right, we're gonna pass a bill to just shut down trans kids, even if there's barely any trans kids in the state. Or just recently, they're passing a bill to come up with a definition of anti-Semitism, or it was this other bill that got passed and it was also upheld in the Supreme Court about the police, you can only observe them from 25 feet away or more. If you get any closer, that's against the law. You know, and sometimes I don't even think they're very organized. They just have such a entrenched power that it's a super majority and get away with what they want. So that has a chilling effect on the population. Like, it's the chances that people are willing to take aren't really there as much as you might see in, you know, even just to our left in Illinois, particularly in Chicago, because there's not institutions. It's something that Nick has said, who's also on the committee, part of IDOC Watch. We don't have the institutions, and I think people tend to think about it just as people just having the willpower, but you have institutions that are organized around specific principles that you can join in, you can get trained, you can learn, and you can know how to attack a certain thing. Indiana doesn't really have those institutions. For the most part, most of the Black leadership is, you know, totally bought off, you know, caught up in Black capitalism, particularly here in Indianapolis, you know, are not really interested in challenging. And I think in many ways help keep, you know, Black folks from really reaching, you know, anything more radical, because they're going to have you caught up doing, you know, buy Black campaigns to get people out of prison, I guess, or something. I don't know, you know, like there's no real sense of organization there. So yeah, you're really just playing defense and trying to figure out what you can do. So when you come down to political prisoners and prison abolition, since we don't have those institutions, you have to build those coalitions from scratch in many ways. You know, so for us working in Madison County, where the Penalty 2 case occurred, like that was one of the big things for us over this last year, and we were successful in building some ground there. Is you got to go into a county you may have no familiarity with whatsoever. You have to touch base with people. You have to try to build up a defense committee in that area, because that's where their case is. So we can go to Indianapolis, we can show the film, and we can have rallies, and there'd be some effectiveness there. But to put pressure on the prosecutor and the prosecutor's office specifically, you have to go into Madison County. You got to deal with all those different contradictions. You got to talk to people. We went to an MLK event the other week. We just had a screening that got canceled yesterday because of the weather. You know, you got to deal with just these little things, you know. And then you got to set up political education, you know, and while you're building the committee, because the case is a way of bringing people in, but you also have to find other ways to get people engaged beyond the case, because the case may not always help inform the broader understanding of how prisons operate. So I could go on, but those are some of the challenges, some of the ways we try to approach it.
No, I think that's a great outline. Akili, could you talk a little bit about the work that you do? I know that you organize in support of women prisoners as well as men prisoners. Shaka has talked a little bit about like kind of some divides that he sees within that, work, and I guess how people connect with men prisoners versus women prisoners. Or maybe that's not the correct thing, but just if you could talk a little bit about that work, as well as the impact that, which you obviously know that this system has on families, on family units, on communities, when we're talking about the prison system, that impact on a kind of community level. You're muted, I think. Let's see. Can I unmute you? There you go. Now you're good.
Okay, you had me muted. I taught that course for about, I want to say 9 years at the university. I developed that course because it became troubling that when you start talking about punishment for individuals who have not lived up to the expectations of so-called normal society, that you put all of these requirements and hoops that they have to jump through in order to be able to come back and be a solid citizen. And one of the conversations that I continue to have with Shaka and with the community is that, number one, when a person is incarcerated, it's not just that person that's being affected. It's everybody that is connected to that person. We've got the children, we've got the family, and it's not fair that they have to do time based off of issues that the state has with trying to keep people in line, to keep them, quote unquote, from breaking the law. prison has never been made for people who have decided they're going to do something outside of what the community states is acceptable. It's for those people who might follow them, to put the fear in them so that they don't make that same decision, because then you'd have anarchy. You couldn't be able to control. So when you put that fear out there, if you do this, then this is going to happen. You're controlling your society in negative ways instead of giving a positive reason why you might want to do something different. You don't give them that opportunity. And when we're looking at who gets locked up in Indiana, Blacks in Indiana are only 8% of the population, but we represent 35% of the prison population of that 8%. It's not a lot. That's like a drop of pepper in a box of salt. And yet we bear the brunt of what is determined to be punishment in the state of Indiana. And so we talk a lot about what happens with our brothers and our husbands and our sons when they go to prison. And the state has basically done divide and conquer. Very little is talked about what happens with the women. They do have a couple of programs they've done. You can keep the baby if you come in pregnant. You can keep the baby a little bit longer than before, but no one is actually looking at how do we reach out to these sisters while they're in there. What is it that they need? What kind of psychological help are they getting? Because people will write and they will, put money on the books for the guys. I've personally seen where females have to almost dig to the bottom of the barrel to get someone to just take that initiative to let them make a simple phone call. And so we have to look at this as a holistic situation with incarceration of our community. We put in all this time with, that we have to look at incarceration in terms of the punishment and the retribution that the victim is getting from whatever the situation is. But it's so political, as it was stated earlier. There's a lot of money in prisons. And if a lot of people will look at their stock options and your 401k plans, you might see where your money is also going into some of these private prisons. Some of your universities, their money is going into on the stock market for private prisons. And the privatizing of prisons means that they're making as much money as possible when they take us behind the wall. The labor has never changed from after the Civil War. We were building bridges, railroads. We were still farming. After the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, it was against the law, like it is now, to be too many on a sidewalk without an ID. And so we are not allowed to remember those things. And so we're not in a position to always, if you're only 35%, you're only 13% of the whole U.S. population, people of color. It's an uphill fight, like Brother Too Black was saying, about going in and trying to get individuals to understand what it takes to be an abolitionist or a revolutionary. And the fight is not so much in the community of people of color. The fight is in those communities that hold us down and oppress us. And they use this hammer to instill this fear and the separation. So I know I'm going a long way around, but what we do on this end with Saving Our Families is we try and work with the holistic approach to families and help them to understand this person didn't just go off to camp somewhere and then they're going to come home and it's going to be, Hallmark, sunshine, rainbows, and all this. There's a whole psychological situation that's going to have to be dealt with. And so we work with the family. We work with the spouses or the partners. We work with the children. We work with that individual. You can't be gone all this time and walk back in and thinking you can take command and be, the head of the household. It's just like a person going to war. When they come back, there's been a few changes made, and they're not always easy to go back and correct. And so Saving Our Families, we work with that. We go and we work personally with individuals. We try and support the families. We do things like Christmas. We send out gift cards to kids in the name of parents who are incarcerated. We want to keep that connection going. We don't want them to break that bridge completely. And the state, we've got 45% of those children in foster care are children of color, because the family is being taken apart, like they've done with Native Americans when they took the Native American children from their parents, sent them somewhere else, until you complete this slow form of genocide. You eventually will kill it all the way off. And you divide them, those that say, well, I made it, and those that says, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but you don't have a pair of boots. You got to start somewhere. So Saving Our Families gets involved with that.
Is that the name of it? Saving Our Families?
Saving Our Families.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Do you have a website for that, Akili?
You know what? Our thing is down right now. We've
Okay.
had a crash thing, and so we're working to get it back up. But I'll send it to you as soon as they get through working on it.
Send it to me. Yeah, let's keep in touch about that. We did a conversation with Dorothy Roberts a couple of years ago, and she has a book recently called Torn Apart that's about exactly what you're talking about as far as the foster care system and Black families in particular being targeted by it. So we do have a couple questions from folks that are watching, and so I wanted to bring those up. They should be pretty easy to answer, so shouldn't take too much time, but they're important ones. So Brooke, shout out to Brooke, asks, what is Shaka's classification status right now? Housing, security, comms access. Could either of you speak to that?
Attorney Jen, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, I can go ahead and answer it. Shaka's classification right now, it's definitely not on Supermax. He is in the Virginia Department of Corrections at that Beaumont institution, has access to email and phone calls. But it doesn't mean that it's a perfect circumstance either. Especially medically, which is why he is there, thankfully, and receiving some measure of care. So I hope that answers your question.
He's a level 3.
Yes.
Okay, and then John Breen asked what the complications or maybe circumstances are. Basically, the question of why the interstate transfer. Why is Shaka housed in Virginia as opposed to Indiana, at least according to what the state's explanation of things is, or what Shaka's explanation is of it?
It's a lot. Well, short answer is what Brother Hondo said about being able to use the interstate compact, which started off, interstate compact. That was a federal thing they would do, and they still do for federal prisons. And then they, with Marion County, I think you said that they start with when they can't control behavior in a manner that they want to, then for Indiana, they've decided that, okay, we'll move these people. If for him, one of the excuses they use is that he was, they were saying that he had issues with staff, and the issues with staff were those individuals who belonged to the Brotherhood and the Aryan Nation and something else. And he called it out a few times, and so that became an issue. There have been some physical altercations on him while he was there, and he brought attention to that, and he put in suits and complaints against the state. So rather than keep him there, they decided it'd be easier to just ship him out. He's calling in now, so he might can answer that too.
If he wants to join, we would more than welcome. If you're able to put him up to the mic, he can say something.
And is subject to monitoring and recording. Thank you for using Global Telling.
Hey, can you guys hear him?
Hey, Shaka, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay. They're asking your status and what made you end up being shipped out of state.
Mostly past history. Previous, what they did in terms of documentation, if you look at the documentation that they included in the video, the exhibits, they used my first incarceration.
Wait a minute, he got cut off or something?
He got cut off.
Yeah. Well,
I think Breen is that Breen who asked that question? Breen?
yeah.
Yeah, you have to understand that in Book 2, we talked about the 13th Amendment as the instrument of re-enslavement of New African people.
That's right.
And this was done in 1977, in the 70s. But it took Ava DuVernay and other people to make that documentary that still is not widely seen, but it talked about the same situation. Basically, once you become a prisoner, you kind of almost like a slave again. They can trade you and do whatever they want, and they can use whatever rationale they say to put you wherever they want to. So no matter what the real circumstances are, that's just the overplay for the underplay. The real reason is that they felt like he was disruptive to the functioning, the way they want the prison to work in Indiana, the prisons to work in Indiana. He was a local prisoner. He had local contacts. He had a lot of supporters, a lot of people on both sides of the wall who knew of his situation. And he was able to, those are things that you can work to build struggle around. So move him to Virginia. And it's the same thing with the brother they had in Virginia who was moved to Indiana. There's a lot of, and like I said, again, with Sundiata and people like that, the interstate compact was designed to break up our ability to build a struggle. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah.
And I know Shaka might have a whole bunch of papers about why they tell him they're doing it, but this is the real reason.
Yeah. Was he was swapped for Kevin Rashid Johnson? Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Yeah. For folks who were participating, there was a phone zap today for Kevin Rashid Johnson and for the hunger strikers. And so
like a horse or a cow or a chicken.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's no more questions in the chat. I want to thank you all for joining us today. If there's anything else that you would like to add, be happy to have you do that. But I'm going to play a couple more clips of Shaka. Unless after you all have anything final things that you all want to say, you please feel free.
I actually had a question, if I could.
Sure.
For Jennifer, I've never asked a lawyer this. What's the significance from the perspective of a lawyer of there being of a client having a defense committee?
I think, I mean, legally, it's not necessary to have a defense committee, but because of the nature, a lot of times, of political or politicized prisoners, it is better to have a community of folks who are able to support the legal efforts by carrying on grassroots work or even lead the legal efforts with grassroots work. So I think it can be very helpful, although not necessary by law.
Well, I think we need to study the history of political imprisonment in the United States. In the 1950s, Puerto Rican nationalists, 4 or 5 of them, shot up the Blair House in Washington, D.C., and they spent the next 27 years in prison. Nobody was killed, but because they were Puerto Rican nationalists and, shouted from the rooftops their desire for Puerto Rico to be free, the Puerto Rican people had to mount a 27-year campaign as a people for their release. And even though it was a righteous action, that's what happened. And then if you look again at the Puerto Rican, the MLN prisoners who did, I think, maybe 16 or 17 years in prison. Again, no bodies. There was no, when I say bodies, I mean there was nobody killed in any of the actions that they were alleged to have participated in. They still were imprisoned as Puerto Rican revolutionaries, and they spent a long time in prison. But I watched the Puerto Rican people wage a collective struggle around all of them. And one of the problems with us is that we're not waging a collective struggle, because some of us are new Africans, some are just black, and all this other stuff. We need a new African political prisoner effort to organize around, which is something we've been trying to do, but it's very difficult. But we also had a situation where not only we have these the contradictions based on our lack of consciousness about our identity as a people, we also had the situation where some of them were prisoners of war, POWs, who had bodies. They had dead people that the state could always point to. So this was a difficult. That was also a difficulty in winning their release. And so a lot of them, like Maroon Schultz, Matulu, you just go down the line. A lot of them, they basically kept them until they were damn near dead. Sundiata, he ran for years inside, I know, and I think he's still alive. I mean, I know he's still alive, but I haven't seen him in public in a long time since he was released. But he did finally win release, but he has spent damn near 50 years in prison. So that's the reality for a new African POW.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Sundiata's medical situation is not good, but I did see a great photo of him the other day with it was with David Gilbert and Sekou Odinga, rest in power, before he passed away, and a couple other comrades, and they were all together, and it was wonderful to see them, together on this side of the walls. But yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you all want to share before I play these final clips? Oh, now I think you're muted on your end, Akili. Hang on, I'm on.
She don't have a mute symbol. Oh, there it is.
Are you there? We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
that's weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
I'm not sure what that is. You might try logging out, and you could log back in, and I could let you in if you want to try that.
Are you muting? Tell her to put the mute symbol on and see what happens. Talk.
No, it doesn't. It's not muted. And let me see if I do this. Let's see. Mic settings. Try now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can. That was weird.
Okay, Shaka, we've got signal. I was going to tell you for individuals who don't really understand parts of the state, look at your Indiana Constitution, and you will see that it states in the Constitution that you're considered a slave if you are up under the jurisdiction of a court or the prisons or the jail, and so you can be treated as such. And people don't know that.
Yeah, basically, the Indiana Constitution, for what substitutes as qualified to the 13th Amendment on the federal level Constitution, it states that there should either be.
Uh-oh, did we lose him again?
No.
Is it gone? Yeah.
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Play
All right, I'm going to play the clips. Thank you all, and then I'll stick around for a little bit if anybody has anything else that they want to say. But I'm going to go ahead and play these last couple clips.
We're back to music again. I don't know what's going on his end.
All right, hang on, folks. I heard that we can't hear. Um, in the comments, if you were able to hear that, let me know. But I'm gonna try something else real quick. Sorry about that. All right. All right, we'll try this one more time. Oh. Actually, that might not work. Sorry, these files got sent to me a different type, and I didn't test this ahead of time. Well, that's not gonna work. I apologize. I will try to figure out a way to play those at another moment, and it's too bad because those are good clips. But anyway, I apologies for the technical difficulties. It's not something I can sort through right this second. But I appreciate everybody for coming through. Thank you so much to our panel. Again, I want to remind folks, um, connect with Shaka Shakur. There's a various ways to get involved in his defense, from petitions to connecting with him personally. Check out the work of IDOC Watch. I would also say, folks mentioned the Jericho movement, which I absolutely, folks should check out the Jericho movement, which is, a bunch of political prisoners here in the United States. And thank you to all the folks who came through and chatted with us. I know that the Shaka absolutely appreciates your, attention and your solidarity. And make sure to share this conversation with people. Use it to educate people around his case. It will be up on the link. And thank you so much. And we look forward. This won't be the last time that we do something connected to Shaka at all, or connected to political prisoners or the new African independence movement. So, stay tuned, and we will continue to bring you more work on that effort. And of course, I would like to really thank Shaka Shakur for, connecting with us and us putting this together. He was very much involved in the process. And thank you to Akili and Jennifer and Hondo and Too Black for participating in the discussion as well. Much appreciated, everybody.